right.
Thanks, Mr. Bob.
All right, here we go. Another True Brew Bobcast here at the end of Détente Road at Cafe Détente. Welcome, Francis and Annabelle Pavy. Welcome to the cafe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us and have a little talk here and drink some coffee.
Oh, yeah. I was looking forward to this one. So, let's start with just art in general. Francis, I know you went to school, went to school for art.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have a certain time, a moment in your life where you had an appreciation for art first, or did you just slowly become an artist and then all of a sudden, while I'm in school being an artist, when did that realization come to you?
The earliest I can remember is my mother got sick in 1959. She had like a miscarriage and she had some problems with she had a hysterectomy, and she was in the hospital, and it was actually touch and go. She almost died, and we also got a TV at the same time. So it was very instructive. I mean, it's hard to remember because I was 5, but I know we were all displaced to our relatives, and I think that was kind of traumatic for me. I can't really remember, but when we came back, we had to be quiet, and so I remember that on Saturdays they had the show John Nagy, Drawing with John Nagy, and he, is geared toward younger people, so and it was all very basic. He showed, you can draw anything if you can draw these 3 shapes, and it was like a circle, a triangle, and a rectangle or square, and he illustrated that by drawing. And so we'd go run and get our paper and we'd start drawing whatever he was drawing, like the landscape with the trees and stuff. And then of course he'd break for commercial. And then when he'd come back, I finished the drawing. But if you want to see how I did it, buy my kit, the John Nagy kit, which is geared toward children. It's like a game. It's like a Monopoly game, It's the same format, same size, whatever. So, of course, I was very intrigued with that, and I begged my parents to get that. And I remember getting it for Christmas, and I still have a John Nagy pencil in my pencil thing. But I was always interested in, art and drawing and color, and eventually they gave me art lessons that my older sister and Edith and I went to have lessons at Girard Park. They had them. Elmore Morgan was teaching kids, and of course we tempera paint, and by the time I got to the first grade, of course I was very competitive art. I was an artist by then, so it was like I liked drawing the best turkey, and I mean it's as far back as I can remember that I wanted to be an artist or make pictures or draw. And I never could really understand how you got from A to B, point A to point, that very finished product. Like, I understand that you had to draw it first and then you colored it and painted it. But I didn't understand how you would refine your drawings, And that's actually been a lifelong process to kind of figure out ways to get the end product, So,
So did your brain track from that early age? Like were you interested in sports and all that other stuff as well, and music and all, or did you always lean towards the world of art?
it was pretty much leaning toward the world of art, but of course I was interested in sports, and I was interested in music. And I was interested in drawing, but I wasn't so much. Of course, we all played, we played baseball and basketball, but, I wasn't athletically inclined. And so that really, and I didn't watch baseball, didn't follow baseball like my friends did, like they'd watch games and they read the papers about what the batting averages were and who was playing for who and who got traded. That didn't appeal to me. Or or trading cards. I had, we buy bubble gum with the trading cards, and that was a big deal. But I was more interested in the design of the cards and the way things were designed, colors, how colors are utilized, and so you know, after Elmore Morgan taught us, how to make orange out of red and yellow. I mean, I started mixing colors in my head. Every time I'd look at color, I'd try to analyze. Well, how would that shade of green be made? I mean, what would you mix to make that shade of green? And that's just kind of like an intellectual process that I started when I was 6 years old, and I did that. I've been doing that ever since.
So, do you try to emulate someone? When did you go from seeing and trying to copy something or trying to emulate something versus creating it on your own?
Well, I guess I didn't. That was probably much in college that I was doing, maybe even high school. I was doing some cartoons in high school.
And this one's for you too, Annabelle, because you just fresh out of school. So, um, like, if you're formally trained to do something like music or art or writing or anything, then do y'all think that dulls the authentic art that's in your head? Like because I'm formally trained, then this is sort of how I need to start doing it versus just if you was on your own creating. It seems like there should be a little formal training in there to get you over some humps. But I mean, what y'all thought on that? I mean, I didn't go to school for art or anything. Do they do they allow for that? Are they just encouraging you to keep you between your lines, or is it sort of institutionalized when it comes to art when y'all were formally trained?
I feel like in school, in graphic design especially, we were taught about all of these restrictions and like these are the rules, stay with inside the lines. But I think now that I have graduated and I kind of do my own research and like watch my own videos on really high ranking graphic designers, all of them say you have that foundation, but explore the abandonment of that and like what does your mind do now that like what can your mind organically put on a page and how can you have fun with it while still making it look beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to know the rules to break the rules. You know.
Okay, that's a great statement.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the formal training from plastic arts has been, you think about the guilds. I mean, when in the medieval days, when people were coming up and they wanted to be a painter or artist, it was they entered a guild and they'd teach them all the secrets, because in those days, they didn't have tube paints or or pencils or anything like that. So they made their own paints and pencils, and they had to learn all this stuff, and that's even more basic than what we learned. But as far as and they were still discovering things like perspective and how to use optics and in making art, So it was actually high science at that point. And a lot of that's been lost, even in art schools. When I went to art school, I mean, they didn't really teach us how to paint. I mean, I had to teach myself how to paint when I got out of school. In fact, I felt like my education was continuing for at least about another 8 years after I got out of school, and I was pretty much self-taught. I mean, because nobody taught me how to paint. Nobody. I mean, we had a painting class, but we were doing acrylic painting, emulating like pop artists with acrylic paint, and they painted in. I mean, the ones we were emulating, they were painting in oil paint, so it's hard to get you know, it's not exactly the same thing. There's shapes and stuff, but and the scale they were using was totally different than what we were doing. So there's all kind of rules that you can learn, but they don't necessarily teach them all in art school. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah. You know, I guess art's so wide, and I think of the old saying, the starving artist. And you go to the square in New Orleans, and you see these artists kind of almost painting I guess the sellers, right? I guess to move money, to move product.
Hmm.
Like they sell, they do the paintings of the French Quarter and the Jackson Square and this and that for the tourists to come in. It's sort of an easy deal. Um, what's the hardest part about being a professional artist? I know you. I know been knowing you, Francis, for a while. You're not gonna march to anyone's drum but your own. But it has to be tough, Annabelle, for a young artist to break their way into the market. What goes on in your brain there when it comes to people that's buying your art?
Well, if I'm not excited about I find that if I don't have great joy and excitement in making what I make, usually I can't stimulate that in other people. So people come in. If I don't really stand behind the work, or I don't feel positive about the work, I can't excite my dealers, or I can't excite anybody else to. I mean, that's generally been the case for me. So I really paint to kind of please myself. So it's not really a commission thing. I have done commissions, of course, and it's a certain amount of integrity that goes into the work that I feel that comes across to the buyer, or the consumer of art. So it's a tricky question. I mean, there's you know, after most of the professional artists I talk to, we don't talk about philosophy of art. It's like, how'd you do in your last show? So yeah, some economics are really important, to artists. So I'm always asking how you did, how's the market.
Well, I think what we can think about is like the wallpaper, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So we've Pavy Studio, Shop Pavy, has previously released a round of wallpapers, and in consideration for like what comes next, you have to think about, okay, well, we've released this like huge variety of colorful things, but and that really was fulfilling to the artist's eye and like what you wanted, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're kind of going back to the drawing board about how can this actually be like marketable to a larger group of people, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my mom is kind of the marketing side of things, and she's more of left brain analytics, and I think my dad is more of the right brain, color, creativity, free thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm kind of sitting in the middle, and I'm trying to
Trying to
find the best. Like how can this be fulfilling, but how can it also be um reach? How can it also reach like a really wide audience and be
mm,
appreciated by a lot of people?
I think well, there's a couple of points there that I'm thinking that, because I'm analyzing this too, and we're learning as we grow in this business. So the pieces we made before are the a lot of the a lot of the pieces we made before are statement pieces. And my work is basically statements. When you put them on a wall, it means something, has a narrative. People get drawn into it. And wallpaper is not exactly a state. People aren't using it as a statement. They're looking as a background for other things to go in front of it and to get along with it. It's like a supporting element. So that's something we didn't really consider, or I didn't consider way back when we were starting to do that. So it's now. I mean, that's been a learning in the learning curve. We're learning that that it's not always. It can be a statement pieces. You can make statement stuff, and you should have some of that in your portfolio of images and patterns. But bear in mind, most people and designers use that as a background. Wallpapers or textiles are using that as a, let's say it's a single instrument ensemble of imagery that you're using to make a statement, a whole room statement. So it's not all about the wallpaper. It's not all about the textiles on the chair. It's all about the elements working together to make
Yeah.
to something.
Yeah. No. So Annabelle, growing up with a artist like your dad, were you just drawn to him and his works, or when did you realize that you loved art and were good at it?
Well, I think that whenever I think about like my childhood, anything I wasn't doing at school, it was like I was either going to theater camp, so I was participating in performance arts. I was going to singing lessons, or if I wasn't doing that, and if I wasn't doing my homework, um, I was in my dad's studio, looking through his supplies, playing with his prints, or
Even how
stealing like a rogue notepad to draw in.
You
What
was
were you
just
gonna
letting
say?
her have her way, Francis?
Oh, yeah, she'd come in, but they actually would come paint a little bit on the paintings.
I would,
Yeah,
but I think I really got into it. I would explore the different tools my dad had. In middle school, I made a book out of a coffee table out of recycled
yeah.
old books from Goodwill and Salvation Army.
Well, I remember when actually the first time I felt like she really had some artistic talent was where we brought her to preschool, and there was a teacher there. I can't think of her name right at the moment, but
Miss Pat?
there was Miss Pat's, but there was a lady the lady that gave us the blue crawfish. Remember? I can't think of her name, but she was real sweet, and she loved Annabelle. Annabelle didn't talk a lot at the time, and I was complaining to her. I said, she just didn't talk. She said, well, we're going to get her to talk. And so
It worked.
and so they were like doing all kind of crafts one day, and so I picked her up, and she says, well, Annabelle didn't go out to play. She stood for about an hour and a half, and she did this little thing, and look how nice it is. And it was really cool. I felt like it had a lot of design sensibility. Sensibilities were pretty sophisticated for a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old. And I don't know whatever happened to that little piece. I'm sure it's tucked away somewhere, but I like the color sense and the way she put everything together in the designs. I thought it was wow. And I showed Kathy. I said, look, this is really cool. And she also thought it was really neat. So Annabelle became an artist. She was lauded for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then if I wasn't hanging out with you, I was hanging out with Mom, and I was looking at like Pantone color books or
And watching what she was doing on the
logo
computer.
making, mark making. So
Well, they say that a child learns subconsciously when they're in the womb. So Mom was doing a lot of design stuff when Annabelle was in the womb. She was a professional designer, so she's always working in Photoshop or Illustrator, making stuff, logos, and doing these iconic ad campaigns. So you got all
Yeah.
that genetic memory
Yeah.
tucked away there.
And then I think it was like my senior year of high school. That was the first art class I took. It was at STM. And that was when I was like, I guess I could like educate myself on this for real. So that's when I decided to actually study design. And it worked out. I mean, I think I chose the right.
So-
I always felt fulfilled in it so far.
How do y'all think that works? Like, how many people out there in the world would have been a great musician, or would have been a great playwright or artist or painter or whatever? Just didn't have that one person to expose them to it, Or do y'all think a true artist or true musician finds their way to it? Because a lot of the stories you hear, a lot of them didn't have any influence. They just gravitated to it. I mean, you started with that TV show, but surely if it wasn't that, it was going to be something else.
Yeah, well, it's like there's no artists, visual artists. there was musicians on my mama's side, and my daddy's side was more. They were interested. They were medical and legal kind of minded, but and there was writers, poets. I mean, my great aunt was it was she was Edith Garland Dupright. She had she founded the library at UL or USL, Southwestern, whatever you want to call it at the time. But she was a writer, and she taught English, and she was always fostering the arts. She was very interested in that. But and in our largest sense, the arts in Louisiana are a developing field because very few people in Louisiana are making art. I mean, when I was a kid, there wasn't any professional artists that I knew of in Lafayette. I mean, and I always knew that if I wanted to be an artist, I knew that the artists, where they live in New York. If you wanted to be an artist, you probably have to go to New York if you wanted to be an artist. And as far as like I said earlier, I wanted to play piano. They wouldn't let me play the piano because that was a girl's instrument. And but they did give me guitar lessons down the line. But everything I played on guitar or piano was, oh, that's nice. But anytime I ever made anything with art, it caused a big commotion. Oh, that's nice. It's a different thing. So it's a reward system, kind of emotional reward system you get from people that kind of push me forward to be, an artist.
You mentioned something going to New York or whatever, and now that you've accomplished through your life, probably would have been easier to go to Paris or New York or somewhere where there's a lot of other artists to feed off of each other. You insisted on Lafayette, and uh, in your book and in some of your articles or whatever, you just love the folklore and the musicians and the storytelling and the whole creolization and everything about it. Like you pull a lot from that. Uh, is that a fair statement, and is that still true?
It is still true, and I think what happened at that point, in the '50s or late '50s, when I was, '59, early '60s, well, there wasn't professional artists in Lafayette, and it was a truism that if you were going to be an artist, you probably would have to move to New York. But by the time that the '70s, late '70s and '80s moved around, when I was a younger adult and starting to pursue an art career, it became a possibility that younger artists could make it here, and why not be a pioneer in that, or start a newer kind of tradition that Louisiana can have visual artists.
Well, you also had made a statement a while back that you pull from true local common art versus a higher
Yeah,
art.
yeah. Well, it's like, well, when I graduated from college, I was accepted to go to graduate school in Indiana, and I just decided that it was too much fun being here, and too much here to investigate and experience and make art about, that I really just wanted to open my own studio. And at that time, I wasn't painting; I was making ceramics. So I was trying to figure out, well, maybe I could, what can I do to, what can I do to make a living? And so I wasn't painting. I was making ceramics, and eventually opened a glass studio. I started working with glass. I got one of my best friends was Charles Kimball. He was a glass artist, and he introduced me to somebody that had a beveling station that needed a beveler in Lafayette. So started working, doing beveling and actually putting in glass like in windows here and stuff, as a glazer. And eventually I started doing stained glass. Worked for him for 5 years and then opened my own stained glass business and did that for 12 years. Then in the meantime started painting, educating myself, really learning how to draw. And, I taught myself all about painting, the materials, what do you use? I studied painting for 6 months before I started painting, what do you do? What kind of materials? How do you make a canvas? What are the paints? What are the pigments? How do you make paint? What are all the different kinds of reds and browns and blues? What basic pigments are there used in painting? The historical pigments, what are used and why are they out of date, and what are we using now? So it took a while, but started painting, and it went on and on.
I love it. So, Annabelle, looking at your dad when he was 23, you're at 23. What's similar, and what's the art world? How is it different than what he had to face when he was your age?
I think, well, I feel like right now at this point in my life, I kind of feel like I'm experiencing this kind of limbo because I'm like post grad, kind of freshly post grad. I'm not. I'm at this point where I kind of have to consider how do I really want to start my path. And a lot of the discussion I have with my mom is, do I want to make this kind of fuller time commitment to this 9 to 5 job, which I think from an artist perspective, from this kind of mind, I kind of perceive it as a cage in a way. Like I fear being locked down. I don't know. And so I think about my dad at my age, and I think about how you were a cook on a tugboat, or
Yeah, a cook on a tugboat.
you were doing.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't want to miss any good stories. Like I don't want to jump into something that'll rob me of this young life experience.
Well,
But I also know that those stories. I mean, you're probably having struggles at that time. It wasn't
definitely.
the
Yeah.
easiest way.
It wasn't. Yeah, right. Believe me, it was. Yeah, it's definitely not the easiest thing. It was like, yeah, I forgot about the tugboat phase.
That'll inspire you to paint them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm thinking that maybe don't, I would think that embrace what you're doing now and really appreciate all the things that if I was to give you advice, free advice, just embrace what you're doing and really kind of savor what you're experiencing now. I mean, I didn't get to go to New Orleans and live in New Orleans. At some point I was thinking maybe that was what I should do, but I never ever got there.
Now,
And
Francis, you said you're a blue collar artist. Like, do you still wake up like you're going to clock in and put in those 8 hours? You had told me that a while back.
I'm a 9 to 5 artist, not a blue collar artist.
You know what I meant?
Yeah,
a nine
right.
to five. That's a better way. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Because,
In other words, like a lot of people say, I have to be inspired to go create something. You're like, no.
oh no, you got to put in the time,
Yeah.
because believe me, you go and sit in front of the easel, you do your stuff, you got to put in the time, because some days you're not going to get there, and some days it's just going to flow off the brush. But you got to sit, and if you're not there putting in the time, you're not going to get anywhere. You just really got to put in your time. It's a time thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can't. A part of that is you have to put in the time because you can't expect every time you're doing art to be good. And I think the bad times kind of make the good times. And I think having that steady commitment or a steadier schedule gets you closer to the good times.
Yeah, there's a story that about Picasso, and it's like there's a famous. He painted a painting, and he sold. Of course, he painted many
He
thousands.
painted a
of paintings.
painting?
Yeah, he painted a painting, but he painted something and he sold it to somebody. And they came back and they said they wanted some documentation, or maybe he didn't sign it or something. And they brought it back to him. He says, "Oh no, that's a fake." I said, "That's a fake." He says, "No, I bought it from you." And he says, "Yeah, but even Picasso makes fakes." So it's what the story is that he's he's painting pretty much kind of not on automatic, but he's painting things that he's pushing them out, and not everything you paint is going to be.
You want your name on it.
Well, I don't. I like everything I paint. I mean, I like everything I put out there. I can't say I like everything I paint because I have destroyed works, not a lot of them, but and if it doesn't work, well, I just keep on working on it until it does work. But not everything you're going to make is 100% or it's going to be like the masterpiece or feel like that's going to be stand up for the ages or something that it's like the very best thing that you've done. But I would say maybe 20% of my output is things that are just I would I think I would want to keep forever and not sell them to anybody. I just things that I absolutely love and of course 20% that's a lot when you get down to making 1,000 paintings. So I mean you can't keep everything.
So why is art so important? Why is art so important today, especially?
You can start on that. Why don't you start
I
answering it?
mean, I feel like why why is art important? I feel like
I mean, it's kind of like I view it like style. Not everybody has it, but most people recognize it. And I think that you know, the more art there is in the world or creativity, it seems the least artificial thing that surrounds us these days. It just seems like we filter in so much stuff that's reproduced or spun off or whatever that just true creation is becoming more important and more rare.
I think I guess for me, I feel like art is important. It's like the simplest but hardest question. I think it's a mode of like meditation. And so I think from the creator's experience, it's like you're not, I don't know, think about the idea of cafe détente. You're not being engulfed by your phone or all the buzzing things around you. You're just kind of like sitting, pen and paper, or a paintbrush to canvas, and it's kind of this exchange that's
I think it
calming.
provokes great thought between people. We'll take like the cafe. And by the way, Annabelle was our artist for the cafe, award winning artist. And so, like, I felt like we had an idea of the vibe and what we wanted. And, it's just when you put it in the hands of an artist, a creative artist, and the stuff that you came back with, the designs and the interpretations of it or whatever, it just sent. I can speak my mind in a whole different direction that I felt good about, and so did the whole team. And so, whether you're decorating your house or whether you're trying to enhance an area or whatnot, I think it sort of provokes their inner artistic deal and goes. So I think that's why it's so important.
I think it's an innate natural expression of mankind. I mean, they were making art. Even the pre-hominids were making art. Apparently, they're finding more and more cave paintings as they go along. So I mean, it's they were using cave art to for well, they don't really know, but they assume that they were using it as a spiritual uh, ritual to hunt animals at some point. I mean, um, I think people visualize humanity or humans visualize in their mind and they need to express that somehow. And I think art is just a natural expression, well, painting or dance or song. It's things that move the spirit and help us evolve.
Went by your place a few weeks ago, and you
Hmm.
showed me that little deal on AI
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
gypsy lady.
Oh yeah, the gypsy lady. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, that's sort of scary because, I mean, now AI can write anything and now give you images. Is that where we heading? I mean, it seems like it's going to be real easier and easier for people to sort of fake their way through writing and art and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
I think it's gonna I think it's gonna weed out the bests because AI is like it's a replication. But so for instance, I needed a project I went on. I needed some cute little AI babies who were just having fun sitting in a studio. And people had done that before, so it could replicate it.
Hmm.
But what AI cannot do is think of new things and do something that the human brain already hasn't.
Hmm.
So, um, one time I tried to plug in Francis Pavy pattern.
Hmm.
It could not do
Yeah, it
it.
couldn't do it.
No.
It didn't. Well, probably wasn't enough references, but I think of it as just like another tool, like a paintbrush or a hammer. You know, I mean, I guess that's that's very appropriate because a hammer is more like something that you pound or actually destroy things with, whereas a paintbrush is more like a creative tool. But I just think of it as another tool in your box of tricks. So and it can be just a labor saving device.
Yeah. And I think that there will be designers who rely on AI too much and they're not the work that comes from that is not going to be it's not going to hold the significance that originality has.
Well, I think that to fully utilize AI, you're going to have to be an AI whisperer. You're going to have to know how to talk to the AI to get it to do what you want.
Right.
Isn't they're not intuitive. It's something that reacts on prompts. So you tell it what to do, and if you don't know how to tell it what to do, well, then it's not going to be able to do it,
Hmm.
or you're not going to be able to get the output
Hmm.
that you need. What you're looking for.
Hmm.
And if you can't, I mean, in the gypsy woman that I showed you, it didn't draw her with the crystal ball. So which even though I specified that, so I had to go put the crystal ball in there. Go found an image of a crystal ball and I manipulated it to the point that I can and put it, chopped and pasted in Photoshop that there was a crystal ball there.
Hmm. Well, um, so do artists sort of um, do they recognize each other sort of in public? Do y'all run circles together, or like do y'all like when you were in school? Do the artsy people sort of know and recognize each other and gravitate to each other?
I say yeah, especially with social media these days, like somebody's going to tag somebody else and you'll kind of recognize you could scroll on their page long enough to understand, oh, we studied at the same place or we're both from Lafayette or we both live in New Orleans. So I think everybody kind of I mean, we were talking about the 6 degrees of separation theory
Hmm.
yesterday.
Yeah. Huh?
Everybody's close enough to you.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And especially being in Louisiana, I feel like everybody kind of knows each other. And in school, you're seeing each other every day. So at least that community, that's how I know each other. But I was thinking about whenever we went to a festival at Cartier, you were hanging out with all your art friends who you'd known since probably my age.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer you're with one another, the more you get to know the
Mm-hmm.
people adjacent to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Yeah. I also think that, I mean, artists are taught, I mean, the whole discipline of seeing, they're taught to see in school. I mean, you learn about negative space and line, how to actually look at an object and abstract it to put it on a page. So it's a way of looking and perceiving that most normal people don't utilize. So it's I think it actually carves paths in your brain that the electrons flow a certain way in an artist's brain that they don't necessarily flow in other people's brains. So and I think actually you magnetize yourself with your thoughts and actions, and I think those you're magnetic. You know, it sounds kind of abstract, but I think you're actually magnetically attracted to people who think and act or think in the same way. You know, does that make any sense?
It does. Um, hey, sticking to Acadiana, Francis, me and you closer to the same age, and so Festival of Cotton, a lot of the things that we do, Vermilionville, to preserve our heritage. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I'll speak for myself. You know, I think of Acadiana, and then a lot of times it's the Cajun French, it's the Creole, it's our heritage is in my mind is sort of stuck almost in the late 1800s almost. Like everybody wants to hold the the Acadian heritage and preserve it. I
Mm-hmm.
get it. I'm all about it. That's awesome. But the truth is, in real time, the acculturation of people that are just the new generations, they're moving forward and mixing and matching, and it's their view. Like I was talking to Panat with y'all saw the little deal with the Laotians.
Mm-hmm.
They came in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and and here they are a generation and a half later, and they barely speak that language anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
they've mixed in and blended in with
Mm-hmm.
Acadiana, and so did the Vietnamese when they after the fall of Vietnam. A lot of Hispanics coming into the mix, and it just got more blended. Um, how do you view that, and do you apply any of that to art, or would you rather stick to the old school preservation?
Well, culture's never been static. It's always been dynamic. The Acadians, what was here before the Acadians? It was what they had,
Creoles were way before the Acadians.
and there was they had a African, I mean, had a American Indian culture. They had the Spanish. Well, see, there's French had the first settlers here were basically were French. They weren't Acadians. They were French, and a lot of Germans from Alsace-Lorraine came from John Law. They had the Louisiana Trading Company. They the first settlers were actually the first settlers were prostitutes and criminals, and they weren't good colonists. So John Law sold a bunch of, he raised a lot of money, kind of, it wasn't always on the up and up, but those shares were traded and they made money and they got people to come here from Alsace-Lorraine, and they were the Germans. That's my ancestors on my mother's side, and they were very hard workers, and they shipped them up to up the river to Vacherie and the German coast, des Allemands, and so that was here. So, but in preceding years after that, the Acadians came. That was under Spanish rule. I mean, when do you define Cajun culture? You're saying that late 1800s, but I mean, it's not static because at that point, the Acadians had been here for
100
100 years.
years, yeah.
So, they had established themselves, and but that's the dynamics of change of the 20th century are just they were on the doorstep of the 20th century. So, had all those inventions that were coming. Oil was discovered, and so that changed Cajun culture. And or was it even known as Cajun culture at that point? When was it defined as Cajun culture? When did the Cajuns decide they had an identity? And
Well,
so
it was commercialized in the early '80s. You remember that Paul Prudhomme, and they just
yeah.
really blew it up that way, and it was
Well, they say that the Acadians finally became when they figured out they when they came home from World War II, a lot of them were honored to be translators in
yeah,
Europe.
yeah, yeah.
So they were valued. Let's say they were valued as translators in Europe. So they came home and they wanted to, all the stress and the trauma from war. They wanted to embrace their culture again. And so Irie LeJeune was a musician that was very popular right after the war, and so and it was a music that was. Harken back before the string band era, probably like Joe Falcone. So people were embracing that, and that was probably the first wave of uh, of self appreciation the Cajuns maybe experienced.
But as an artist, to tell the stories, like if somebody comes back and say, you know, Annabelle and Francis, did y'all art depict the time that you were living on the earth?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Do you try to stay current? I guess is the right question.
always. I mean, if you, my experience has been that if you're not gonna make art about your experiences, well, it's not really kind of that. I mean, it has more depth and more gravitas
Yeah,
if you've experienced it and you've lived it.
you feel that, Annabelle?
I guess I guess I really haven't gone about making my art as a documentation of my lived experience. I think I just like to, I don't know. It just kind of comes out. I don't
Yeah.
consider it
Well,
in that
man,
way, but
that's
I would
real. That's
enjoy
real
doing that.
time. If it's just coming out, you're doing it real time. And I know your work. I feel it does exactly that. I mean, you seem, I don't know, progressive is the right term, but I think you real. Like it's like everything you do is so authentic. You're not trying to replicate something or whatever. It just seems like it's on the front of your eyes in your mind. That's why I appreciate your art. But I guess, I look at other artists that are out there, and you can almost tell they were living in their time. And some artists, I won't name any, sort of, I don't know, they play off of big oak trees and different things like that that kind of make it kind of a different time and place.
I don't I think that I look at paintings. You can kind of look at even some curators and some art historians can look at paintings and they can tell that was done in the 1840s, and it's just a quality of the artwork that it's hard to paint out of your time, I think. Even though you're saying that let's say somebody's trying to emulate something else, well, somebody that's really honest and true and kind of as a historian, they can they can say, well, this person is painting in the 90s and they emulating somebody from the 40s,
Right, right. No, I think people pick up on that pretty quick.
Yeah.
Do you ever create by the mood of the country or the mood of the times?
I think that's an innate in what you're feeling. If you're tapped into your what's current events, or it's I think it's hard to paint out of your time and your experience.
Yeah, I think you can draw inspiration from like I guess especially in graphic design. If I'm if I'm like developing a brand or something, this can be inspired off of something that has come before that might be significant to the person or whomever, but I think there's always a presentness, like you can't exactly replicate what has come before you, but I think you can make it better or explore it a little bit more.
So is there usually, you know, I know when you go into a piece, I don't know, I'm asking, are you trying to tell a story? Or are you trying to set a mood? Or you just, am I overthinking it and you just start to create something and it all comes together? And it's at the end, you like, yeah, it's this or whatever. I mean, walk us through like creating. People that don't create, it's sort of interesting to know like what goes through your mind while the process is moving.
Well, it's when I'm painting with paint and I'm just like painting with a brush. The earlier work that I was doing, it's more narrative, and I'd make little drawings, kind of like little doodle sketches, and that is more like a definitive kind of narrative that I'm trying to capture. When I was doing these print kind of paintings, it's more like a creative improvisation. So there's a dance with the paintings too. There's kind of like a little improv dance with the paint when I'm painting with the brush, because I'm not necessarily sure what kind of colors I'm going to use or how things work. But one thing becomes, if this is this, if this is red, well then this will have to be green, and as far as like a design sense. Uh, but generally there's a narrative, and I'm trying to capture that narrative. And if I can't capture that narrative, well then I'll have to paint it again. And sometimes images just haunt me. I call them that. I'll have something that visits me, an image that comes into my head, whether a story somebody tells me or something. And so I'll get an image or icon in my head, and I want to get it out. And generally, it's easy with a brush than it is to printing, because the printing is I'm using the relief blocks is kind of like a brush, so and it takes a lot longer to do that kind of work. And it that is more like an improv for me. It's more improvisation, because I'm not exactly sure uh, how the piece is going to evolve, and it takes a lot longer for the piece to be finished. So I feel like it's more. I'm not exactly sure where I will end up on those pieces, and at this point, those have been I've kind of come to impasse. So I'm going back to brush painting more, and I'm doing actual portraits, and that's what I did in the very beginning. So and it's kind of like a discipline. It's like embracing a discipline again to kind of get back to where I need to go.
Well, I tell you, y'all family unit, I had the privilege to be around y'all, and it's such a unique group. I mean, y'all have Kathy, your mom, just really has the marketing eye and knows how to bring the little piggy to market and knows how to put it together and interpret it and I'm sure keep everybody straight. And then, um, Lily's she's brilliant in her own way. And then y'all two sort of, from what I could see, kind of the artist side of it. So I love it. I love to watch how it's evolving. I mean, where do y'all think the next chapters of the Pavy art world will is? What should we look forward to?
I'm not exactly sure. Well, I mean, we're going to continue doing the textiles and wallpaper, and we hopefully want to build that business. I wanted to start that personally because I wanted to be able to ha pass on a legacy to Annabelle and Lily, and I'm really enjoying the portraits that I'm doing right now. I feel it relates back to the very early days of painting that I was working on, and it's very challenging in the sense that it's very taxing. Well, it's not taxing. It actually kind of sharpens my skills. I'm sharpening up my skills again to paint. So I'm really happy, and it's very rewarding when I've finished those works. I'm really excited and I'm really joyous. So I'm going to be doing those for at least for the next year or two, and I'm going to see where that goes. And I'm not sure where else I'm going to go after that, but we'll see what happens.
I feel like,
You're in New Orleans right now.
yeah, I'm in New Orleans right now. I think in my art, I feel like the overarching goal for myself is like, I think okay, so we talked about the starving artist narrative. I think I grew up with the opposite of that. Like I had a firsthand testament, two firsthand testaments how you can make it in the design world, in the art world,
Yeah.
successfully. And you can do that in Louisiana. And I think at my main goal right now is like, what can I do with my skills that is original to my family? Like, I'm not trying to nepotism child my way through this world. What can I bring new to the table? And in what ways can that benefit my community and make Louisiana a bigger contender in the art world? Yeah.
Well, it's not nepotism. It's
Well,
it's like your natural ability is you're naturally good at what you do, so there's no nepotism there.
I think
It's like,
that acknowledging
Y'all had a
my
pretty good
parents.
blueprint, though. I mean,
yeah.
y'all did very, very well in the industry as artists, and so you're right. You did have a first-hand look, but
Yeah.
you have your own deal in your
Yeah.
own right. I mean, you have some excellent skills.
Yeah.
So how does it? How's the next chapter, Francis? You just wake up and you just create, man. You just keep going till you roll, huh?
Oh yeah, man. It was like I got 100 projects. I mean, believe me, I have plenty of ideas. Ideas are very plentiful. It's just getting the time to do it.
That's the issue, is that there's never enough time.
Yeah, it's the time.
There's enough ideas, but there's not enough
There's
time.
enough ideas. You got to hone those ideas. That's the whole thing about when I say images haunt me. Ideas fester to the point that they just got to come out.
Right.
And then usually the great ones kind of just boil to the top, and then you can kind of.
Right. Right.
And so if they're not if they finally boil to the top and they're not any good, well then there's always something else coming up.
So, any advice to anyone watching this that they're or they feel like an artist, they don't know how to really get out and express themselves? What would you say to those guys?
I think don't be deterred by the first thing that comes out on the page, cuz if it's not looking like you anticipated it, you just want to give up immediately. But allow yourself to kind of get lost in just the doodling and the sitting outside or in a calm place and just pencil and paper, just sketch away what you see or what you're thinking. And it doesn't matter. don't put any judgment on it. Just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, for lack of a better word, it's kind of like a numbers game. I mean, you just got to put out the work. You know, they got to keep in there and do the work and do the work and do the work and do the work until keep creating until you finally get an expression that you're unique and proud of. Like I had a friend who lived in New Orleans, and he wanted to be an artist, and so he invited me over. I said, and he showed me his 6 paintings that he made, and I said, well, you know, you got to make at least 50.
Right.
You know, and he was kind of at that point. I think he was a little shocked. You know.
Right. A lot of work and all that.
Yeah.
All right. So, what's the best way to sort of follow your work and in the whole Pavy work that y'all do? Y'all still have y'all spot downtown.
Yeah, we got a spot downtown.
Throw out the address.
Yeah, it's 100 Vermilion Street. It's in the Gordon Hotel downstairs.
Can't miss it.
And there's a lot of stuff there. We have a little shop. We do have all our merchandise there, our merch. You know, textiles and wallpaper, as well as like some prints and things like that. Of course, I have my studio in town, and then of course, a wonderful gallery in New Orleans, Arthur Roger Gallery. They represent my work, and so they always have something there. And if you go in and see, that's at Arthur Roger Gallery is on 432 Julia Street in New Orleans, and they will always have something there. And if you ask, they usually have something hanging somewhere.
Do you have like? Can they go online and see anything available?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you can go online to see all those. My particular website is pavy.com, and then the shop.pavy.com, and Arthur Roger Gallery is arthurrogergallery.com. I show also in Austin with I can't remember the name right now.
Cut that part out. Cut that part out.
You have to cut that part out.
We'll find out and put it up. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Annabelle has a website.
I have my own website, apavydesigns.com. But I primarily do a lot of work through pavystudio.com, which I think we might need a...
Consolidate at some point. Yeah, we will eventually.
We have a lot of .coms going on, but
Yeah,
you can also just find us on Instagram, Shop
yes,
Pavy.
Instagram, Facebook. You know,
Mail, or shouting really loud if
Yeah.
you're in proximity to us.
Well, y'all are all very approachable. Y'all sure at a lot of the events, and y'all love to talk to people, and that's cool. That's always been a real cool part of y'all being a part of our community. And hey, we'll leave it at that at the True Brew Bobcast for now, and hopefully we can have a few more visits. And y'all look out for the Cafe Chronicles. Get the app, Cafe Détente. Go to the App Store, type in Cafe Détente, click on the little coffee bean, and it's our newspaper. And I'm trying to get these guys to put a tile in there and let us see the inside of their workings.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we'll do this again soon.
Sure, it
All
was
right.
fun. Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
Thank you very
you.
much. All right. Thanks, sir.